Welcome to the Reddit Chronicles. Today we are reading from Am I the Jerk? Our first post is by Throwaway. Am I the jerk for breaking my fiancé's family tradition by naming my son what I wanted? Myself, 25F, and my fiancé, 27M, have a 2-month-old son. We are overjoyed at being parents, but most of my in-laws are refusing to even see our baby because of a decision we made concerning his name. My in-laws have a tradition of giving the firstborn son of every generation the same name. Let's say it's Peter. This has been going on for about 7 generations already, and they're very serious about it. My fiancé's eldest cousin was the latest person to get named Peter. Every one of his cousins has only had daughters so far, so our baby is the first son of his generation, and consequently should get the name. I have no problem with the name Peter, and would have been okay with naming my son that. Unfortunately, that was also the name of my uncle, who died before I was born. I won't get into details, but it was tragic and traumatizing for my family. My father never got over losing his younger brother. My grandmother asked the family not to name any of our future children Peter during her lifetime. My mother-in-law and father-in-law knew about this promise, and at first seemed to not only be okay with us avoiding the name Peter, but also supportive of the one we chose. However, my grandmother sadly passed away when I was 7 months pregnant. We traveled for her funeral. On our last days there, my in-laws called to offer me their condolences. Then my mother-in-law asked me if I was willing to think about the name Peter now. Suddenly, they were insistent that the name we chose was awful, and we had to honor their tradition. According to them, they had only agreed to make an exception for us for my grandmother's sake, and had no obligation to keep it now that she had passed. My family agrees that while it's true we don't have to avoid the name anymore, it still doesn't feel right to use it. My fiancé agrees with me as well, but his parents spent the last weeks of my pregnancy trying to convince us to change our minds about the name. When our baby was born and we named him what we wanted, my in-laws were furious that we had broken a 7-generation-old family tradition. Some of them hadn't previously wanted to name their sons Peter, but did it anyway for the family's sake. They said our decision was selfish and that my family should have moved on by now. This has truly nothing to do with whether my family has moved on or not. It just felt like a betrayal to my grandmother and uncle's memories to even consider using the name. My father-in-law offered us $1,000 to change our son's name to Peter after he was born. That was 2 months ago, and neither of my fiancé's parents have met the baby or seen us since I was pregnant. Most of my in-laws are on their side, and this is causing a huge rift between my fiancé and his family. He assures me he's fine, but I'm starting to feel really guilty about this. Am I the jerk? Edit. The tradition started, as far as I know, when OG Peter died and his son, also named Peter, named his firstborn after his father. Peter III ended up having the first son of the following generation and did the same thing. That one died before having children, so his sister gave the name to her son, and so on. The name Peter is very common in my country, so none of them ever got bullied over it. And the fact that it was also my uncle's name isn't as unlikely as one might think. Also, middle names aren't used in my country. Most people get the maternal surname before the paternal one instead. Edit 2. It wasn't $1,000. Different country, different currency. It's still a lot of money, but would probably translate to about $200 United States dollars. Update. About a week after my post, my fiancé's parents contacted us. They apologized for their behavior and begged to meet my son. They said they were ready to leave the naming debacle behind and truly wanted to be involved in their grandson's life. We were skeptical, but invited them over to meet the baby. The visit went well. They began coming over almost every day during the next 3 weeks. I noticed neither of them ever called my son by his name, but I didn't point it out. For the first time in months, things seemed good between my fiancé and his parents. One day, my fiancé was helping my father-in-law with something at our place. So my mother-in-law and I went to the park with my baby. Some time later, I had to go to the bathroom, so I left him in the stroller with her. When I got back, she was sitting on a park bench chatting with a woman who was cooing over my son. I went over there and introduced myself as son's name's mom, and she said, "I thought his name was Peter." I didn't say a word, and neither did my mother-in-law. She followed me to the car, and we went back to my apartment. On the way there, I texted my fiancé about what had happened. The moment we got there, he kicked both his parents out of our place. He'd read my texts and confronted his father. Thankfully, my father-in-law is a terrible liar and confessed immediately. Apparently, both my in-laws only call my son Peter. That includes whenever they're talking about him, every time they introduce him to someone else, and even baby talking to him on the few occasions they were left alone with him. Neither of them are embarrassed by this, and they both think they're in the right. We're heartbroken, especially my fiancé, not only because his parents can't let go of their pride, but also because the name we chose for our son means a lot to us both. I blame myself for encouraging my fiancé to allow them near our son. I was raised in a different city than all my grandparents and always wished they could have been more involved in my life. Losing my grandmother didn't help. Pretty much every doubt I had only existed because I thought it would be important for my son to grow up with all of his grandparents around. But now, all my guilt is gone. If they can't respect my son enough to call him by his name, they don't deserve to be in his life. I hope they enjoyed the 3 weeks they had with their grandson, because that's all they're getting until they get their heads out of their asses. Our next post is by Do Drawing. Am I the jerk? My husband has changed all of the baby's diapers. Am I the jerk for asking my husband to change our son's diapers? My husband has changed probably 90% of our son's diapers for the first 1.5 years our son was born during COVID. I had a super traumatic birth. Our son almost died during labor, and we were all alone. We both worked from home, and our son was very colicky. I was exclusively breastfeeding, and was up every night with him, doing all bedtime feedings, nails clippings, teeth brushing. He did baths and diapers. It seemed like a fair arrangement. Eventually COVID ended, and we got a nanny for Saturdays, and our son started daycare. He goes from 9 to 5. My husband started leaving for the day for work. I asked him to change the diapers when he was at home, because our son, who is in the 100th plus percentile in height and weight, was hard to manage for me. I got by on days when I was alone, but it was definitely difficult. Even when my mom would visit, she would have hard time with the diaper changing, and she works at a childcare facility because he was big and unruly. Now our son is 3 and almost fully potty trained. He wears a diaper overnight. So we put a diaper on at night and take it off in the morning, and I'm pregnant again with really bad nausea. So I've asked him to get the baby ready in the mornings, as I'm usually choking back the vomit. My husband has decided he will not change any of the future baby's diapers and has become very resentful, saying that it was totally abusive and abnormal for him to change so many diapers through our son's life, and that other dads don't have to change so many diapers. It's not like I've changed 0 diapers. I changed diapers anytime he wasn't home. On sick days, I am always the one who stays at home with him and cares for him completely. I always felt like our parenting duties were pretty evenly divided until I got pregnant 3 months ago, and things have definitely been harder since then, because it's hard for me some days to do the things I used to do, like make breakfast, get his daycare bag ready, physically pick him up. Am I the asshole for letting him, expecting him to change so many diapers? In the comments below, Awkward Ganache writes, I am a dad of a 4-year-old and 22-hour-old. I've done all but 2 diaper changes so far on the new one. Nurses did the 2, so my wife can rest as much as she can. I did the same with our now 4-year-old. Wife is off work for a year to raise the child, which means everything when I'm at work. The least I can do is change every diaper when I'm home. Even if I'm tired after a long day's work, because my wife's work right now is 24/7. She lets me sleep through the night so I can be rested for work. I let her rest as much as possible when I'm home. It's called being a good partner, and it's critically important to make a good parent. Fathers, don't be dicks. Do your part. Our next post is by Tough Chocolate. Am I the jerk for giving my mom the silent treatment after I found out she was pregnant? I, 20F, always had a complicated relationship with my mother. Throughout my childhood, she always had problems with addiction. Basically, what I remember from my childhood with her is living with her until things got so bad that our family had to step in, moving in with them, my mom getting better, then moving back in with her only for her to get worse and the cycle to start all over again. However, since I was 13, I live with my uncles. They are incredible, and they have always been the parents I needed. But since then, my mother has not asked me to stay with her again. My uncles always explained that she had a disease, and her leaving me with them was proof of her love for me. You can imagine that my relationship with her has always been complicated, but I've always tried to understand that this is something that is out of her control. In the last months, she's been on a good streak again. Stopping all that stuff, she's moved in with a new boyfriend, and he seems to be someone that wants to help her out. We don't see each other much, but I try to call her at least every 15 days, and my parents always try to report to me about her improvements. However, last week, after a long time, she was the one that called me and asked me to go out. I tried not to get too excited because I already know what she's like, but at the same time, I was happy. When we met, she explained how her boyfriend has helped her to cut 100% contact with anyone who influences her to go back to addiction, and how she wants to be a better person. She even started therapy and went to rehab for a while. I said I was very happy and asked what finally motivated her to make that decision. And then she told me that he helped her, but that the big motivator that gave her strength is that they decided to start a family, and that she wanted to meet me in person to let me know that she is pregnant. She said she needed to be better, to be present, and that is what is helping her focus on recovery. It hurt me, that they were worth it, but I wasn't. I decided to leave before our lunch was even over and ignored all forms of contact from her thereafter. As people say, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything. However, yesterday, her boyfriend called me. I answered because I didn't have his number saved, and he started yelling at me. He said I was an asshole, that for him I would never have contact with his family because apparently no one knows where my mom is, and what hindered her improvement was my attitude. My grandparents are also angry with me and said that I am very irresponsible and that I didn't have emotional responsibility with someone very vulnerable. My parents said I didn't do anything wrong, but I have my doubts. Am I the jerk? Thank you for listening to the Reddit Chronicles. Follow for more content.